Hey everybody, what's up? It's me, Digibro, and I'm here with my brother,
Victor.
And we're going to be talking about...
Berserk.
Berserk. Because there's a new Berserk anime in town.
Yes.
And it sucks.
It's garbage.
And
it makes me feel bad inside.
And we wanted to address this while also using it as an excuse to test out our new lighting and microphone setup.
Very clean, very bright.
We decided to go back and watch the first episode of the original Berserk anime. Because the original Berserk anime, the first episode has been somewhat contentious over the years, because it takes place after the entire rest of the series.
Yeah.
And doesn't...
Well, it's like how the manga starts, because the manga starts with an entire, 3-volume arc before the Golden Age.
Right.
And so this basically takes the idea of that and condenses it into an anime original episode.
It's
not... that didn't happen in the manga. This exact story didn't happen. Because in the manga, He goes through and he meets Puck, and then he goes to this town and he fucks around in the town for a while.
Yeah.
And then he goes and he meets the hand or whatever at the end, and then it foreshadows and then it goes into telling the story of how he got there.
Basically, the first chapter of the manga has been hyper condensed into a story. The elements have been taken from it to create a story for the first episode. But the whole purpose of this first episode is just to tell you that this is what happens to Guts after the end of the series.
Yeah.
You know, because that's how the manga starts. Before it goes back and tells his whole backstory, and the anime covers that arc. And the anime does not have a real ending. Somewhat infamously. It just kind of ends in the middle of the worst thing ever happening, and then it just stops, and that's it. So the first episode is kind of the last episode.
Yeah.
As long as you bear the brand, your anger, your sadness, your pain, and even your fear, everything is ours.
As someone who I've been going through and making all these videos about how you can tell a great anime from the first episode a lot of the time, or at least you can tell that it's not going to be terrible. And some people have brought up Berserk as what about Berserk? The first episode is so different from the rest of the show. And so I was curious about it from that perspective. Is it a terrible first episode? What did you think?
I thought it was great, and it at least establishes... I mean, it feels much better in comparison, because now we've watched the new show and felt that.
Yeah.
But looking back at this old show, you immediately... First of all, it delivers on the art style of the manga, I think. It doesn't look exactly the same as the manga, but it delivers on the style by having gorgeous backgrounds, a dark color palette, a slow, brooding tone that fits what's the violence and the darkness of Berserk, which is essential to communicating the tone of Berserk, is having it be dark, you know? It needs to be dark.
Well, we were both really interested by the opening part. The very first thing that happens in this show is just a black screen with white text on it. It's very stark, and it's just the opening narration, which in every other episode will have the god hand holding the behelit doing this narration with voiceover. But this is just... no voice, it's just text, and then this low bass rumble. This dark, brooding bass. And, it immediately establishes the tone. It's, dark, brooding.
And the thing is, they do that in the new show. They do that intro sometimes. I can't remember. I wish we'd gone and watched the first episode of the new show again.
They do it with the voice acting.
Yeah, they do it. They do a similar thing, but it feels super corny and confusing and dumb. Whereas this was just very tasteful and
Well, I thought it was interesting because no other episode of the show, they all open with that monologue, but always with the god hand and with the thing. With this one, it was so stark and just and it's oh man,
and it slows you down. This is gonna be ready.
Yeah, I was my heart rate came to a crawl and was and then the opening starts, which both of us agree A phenomenal opening.
Yes.
Another opening is also contentious of Berserk just because it's so upbeat that a lot of people don't think it fit the tone of the show.
I think it fits the tone.
So put your glasses on, nothing will be wrong. There's no break, there's no fame. It's up to you.
I mean, I also know the song really well, so I might just love the song.
It's one of my favorite songs.
It's
like,
badass.
Not just one of my favorite OPs, but one of my favorite songs.
And it's got the great imagery of, like, Guts walking alone and, like, the flower burning and shit. Like, it's cool and it fits the tone to me. It's still, you know, it gets you hyped to watch an episode of anime. But
I think it communicates loneliness. Like, it always shows Guts, like you said, alone, you know, standing on the cliffside, always kind of far from the camera a lot, you know, or screaming and stuff, but it's very focused on just Guts. And, you know, the lyrics and the tone of the song are sorrowful. Like, it's a fun, energetic song, but it's sort of sorrowful and it's kind of heavy.
It's too late.
It's not until, like, 3.5 minutes into the episode that there's any dialogue.
Yes.
The first scene is just them forging the sword, and that scene is fucking great for setting the tone. It's just,
super cool.
You see just the fire light up the screen, and you're just hearing the clang, clang, clang. No music, no dialogue, just a dude forging a huge fucking sword. And that's all we need to know that this sword is badass.
It's a badass sword, yeah.
You know, like, the forging process of it is this stoic, manly, masculine thing, you know? And then, of course, we finally get into the episode itself in this bar scene. And we can draw a direct parallel here because they almost did the exact same bar scene in the new series.
Ugh. God. I hate this new series so much.
I want to see my face in it. Who goes there? You're a dead man.
次はてめえが的だ。おい、邪魔だからさ、どいてくれねえかな。てめえ誰に向かって口を切りだ。てめえ、ふざけやがって。
It's just the lighting of the new series sucks because the backgrounds are all just like shit. They're all just kind of bland, plain-looking things, and then the color palette is all vibrant. And it's like, I understand this isn't the 90s anymore, and things tend to be a little more vibrant these days and, like, colorful, but you can make it look darker, and not by adding just this weird shading on everything that doesn't move with the characters. Like, that's not the proper way to make things dark. Like, just literally use darker skin tones or something. Like, Guts is pretty tan in the 90s version.
Yeah.
And that makes him look darker. And then, like, just what the
well,
it hurts.
In this old show, the art direction is by Shichiro Kobayashi. I have a whole video about him. One of my favorite background artists in anime.
The backgrounds are all like hand painted.
Yeah.
Dark.
Well, they look like a fantasy world.
Yeah.
Like that's what gets to me about, and this was also true of the new movies of Berserk, which are not nearly as terrible as the show.
It's funny because the new movies bothered me like passionately. I had like a passionate rage for those new movies until the show comes out, and now the movies look really good in comparison.
Right.
Because I already hated the art style of the new movies.
It's not that I have anything against CG, but it's fucking Berserk. And
it doesn't work for Berserk.
Yeah.
Because it makes everything look like these smooth, like...
Berserk
I don't even know how to describe
Berserk is like, you can see the hand of the artist in every picture in Berserk, and especially in the newer chapters where like he draws these very wispy fantasy, like it looks like he's painting, even though he's using pens. It looks like a painting because every stroke is so wispy, and you can really see where his hands were on the art. You know, the original 90s anime, I feel like the backgrounds especially perfectly capture that because Shichiro Kobayashi fucking hand drew them, and you can easily recognize his handiwork. All of the shows he's ever done background art on, it's immediately apparent. You know, you take one look, you can tell it's him.
And any frame you take out of that could stand alone as a beautiful frame
artwork. Yeah,
like it's all beautiful.
Any shot from there's the opening shots where it's showing the castle and it's just this dark fantasy landscape thing, you know, that you would expect to see on the cover of a fantasy novel. It all feels so lived in and real, and like the new one doesn't at all.
It's almost like every frame should look good enough without being animated that you shouldn't have to animate it.
Right.
Like, especially because every panel of the manga looks good as a standalone panel, you know? Like, it always looks good. And then if you look at the 90s anime, every frame, some of them aren't animated. Like, sometimes it's just a painting that it's scrolling across, and you're not even bothered by it because it looks so good. Another thing, it wasn't until, like, the last scene that a song plays in the background.
Yeah.
Like, there was no background music. In this new show, there's almost always a background song, and they suck ass.
Right.
Like, they're super goofy. They don't fit the tone. They completely take you out of it. It just, like... Again, give it that sort of light, awkward tone that doesn't fit the dark...
And I will say, the
Berserk.
music in Berserk in 97 is weird, but it's great. Because it's Susumu Hirasawa's music, who did the music for most of the Satoshi Kon films and Paranoia Agent. He's famous for the opening of that. He does really weird electronic music.
Yeah.
And it is strange that a fantasy show has an electronic soundtrack.
Yeah.
But the music is great. And it creates such
freaky.
a weird, it creates a weird, freaky tone for the show.
Feels horror, you know?
I mean, like, Forces is an electronic song, but it feels like a battle song.
For what sake do humans come into being? What do humans live for?
Yeah.
It feels like riding into battle on horseback and fighting an epic war is how the song Forces feels, which is why it felt so appropriate, even though the instrumentation is totally not fantasy at all. It's super 90s, but it aged beautifully because it's good, you know? Whereas, like, and the animation of this show is timeless, I think, of the 90s show. You can tell it's from the 90s because it's hand-drawn and it's all cell animated, but it doesn't it holds up, is what I'm saying. Like, if you look at another show from the same time period, Orphan, which is another fantasy show from the same era, that show has great character designs and it's the same background artist, but the directing of it is not that clean, and it just feels very 90s. It feels like it's from a time that long gone, that you would never do something in that style again. You know, you would never want another show that looks like that because we kind of moved past it. I mean, to some extent you might, especially if you love the 90s aesthetic. But Berserk, like, if they made a new show today that had the exact same aesthetic as Berserk 97, but with the new animation techniques, it would still look amazing, and you wouldn't question it at all.
Yes.
So it feels timeless in that way, you know?
And it has good... I really think it comes down to directing. And this is what I was thinking when I was watching the new show, because it's all these fucking camera angles that follow the characters and, like, swoosh around
the camera work
and do all this ridiculous stuff, and it's just like... First of all, I don't see how that fits the tone of Berserk.
No.
At all. And I think it's ultimately missing the entire point. It's like they looked at Berserk and said, this is a dark show about a guy who swings a big sword and kills things, and it's cool. And it's like, well, Berserk is cool for that. I read it when I was 15 because it's about a guy with a big sword killing things.
Right.
You know, that's what I initially went into it with. But it's not just some rad show that's like super metal and it's about guts killing shit. And so this new show feels like, yeah, let's make it rad. Let's have these swooshy cameras and glorify the violence and have this weird fucking scene where the horse is about to rape the girl, and it goes into this bizarre cartoon animation.
We're gonna try to stick to episode 1 stuff.
Yeah, I'll go back to episode 1, even though I've watched 4 episodes. You've only watched episode 1, right?
Right.
But yeah, it does all this stuff to be like rad. Like even in episode 1, they add in a part where all of a sudden a giant tree monster comes out.
Yeah.
And Guts
which
fights
apparently that tree monster is in the manga, but it's way later.
Okay.
It was
wasn't
actually
in that chapter, right?
No, it's not in that chapter. It's from a way later part when he first like has the curse mark and like that next arc that they skipped in the new anime.
Yes.
It's from that arc.
They do like chapter 2 of the manga and then they skip an entire like whole load of shit.
The scene in the bar, to compare them, in the original show, then we see these 3 scumbags walk into a bar and they're tormenting this young girl, and everyone else in the bar is sort of characterized as being afraid of them. Yeah. They're like, we can't do anything because these guys are, they're strong or they work for the castle, like we can't fuck with them, right? Yeah. And they're all kind of like, they all seem like they're vaguely mad that this is happening, but they can't do anything about it. Every single character has a distinct design. Mm-hmm. Everyone in the bar looks different. They've all got like different facial hair, different hair and stuff. The 3 thugs, one of them's got like a mullet, one's like a fat, weird looking dude, and they're torturing this girl who's a super cute girl. Yeah. These are all just minor characters. They're all going to be there for like 5 seconds. Yeah. But they drew this girl really well. She kind of looks like Lane a little bit in the face.
She reminded me of like the girl from Idolmaster. Probably just because I know
Which girl from Idolmaster?
The main like brown-haired girl.
There's no main...
I thought there was like a main one.
Anyway,
I've never seen Idolmaster.
There's like 40 girls in Idolmaster.
Yeah, but there's like the front of the poster girl,
the scene is going on and it feels like disgusting. It's like these gross, weird guys, and then all of a sudden, thunk, arrow through one guy's neck, and you're like, oh shit, or like right through his head, right? And then boom, 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 all the other guys get killed, and they're like, oh shit. This dude, takes a girl hostage, boom, right in the arm, he gets hit with a knife, and you're like, oh shit. And Guts comes in, and he's, like, torturing this guy. Guts is immediately a hard ass. Yeah. He's, like, kicking a fucking knife into a guy's shoulder. Like, fuck you, right? Because Guts is not just a, like, cool guy. He's not just cool and mysterious. Yes. He's mean. Yeah. He's not a good guy.
Exactly.
He's an asshole. You don't ever want to have the sense that he's, like, dark and brooding, but will totally help you in a pinch. No. He's just a dick, And our first instance of him fighting someone is like he's fucking kicking a sword into the guy's arm, And then a guy tries to attack him from behind, and we get the big sword reveal. Now, in the new show, the sword sounds like... It sounds like someone's taking a metal pole and smacking a trash can with it. It sounds like shit.
Everything sounds like shit.
And then in the old show... when he unleashes his sword, it sounds like all of hell screams. And it was like...
intimidating.
Yeah, and the way it's revealed, like... It's like you just see this dude get cut all the way in half and his body flies through the air. It's intense when this sword comes out. And when he, when he uses it again, because he only uses it twice in the whole episode. Yeah. Once when he kills that guy, and then once when he kills the boss. Because he usually uses his other weapons, all these little weapons he has on him. But then, he uses it 3 times because he cuts the horses in half. But when he kills the boss, the framing of each shot of this sword swing is fucking rad. You see it like coasting along the ground. It's got these really dynamic angles, cuts through the air, cuts the guy in half, and the camera like pans out on the blood spray. It's very Gainax feeling, and it's just a really iconic piece of animation that like totally sells this sword. Yeah. It sells this as the coolest sword. Yeah.
I love that it feels heavy when he's holding it.
Not just because they tell you it's a slab of iron, but because it looks like it took like 6 shots to show this sword swinging, you know? That's how heavy it is, that it has to travel through 6 different panes of motion in order to hit a guy.
Yeah.
It's crazy, you know? And I will say that, like, this isn't the most exciting episode.
Yeah.
It doesn't get you, like, oh man, this plot seems really interesting, or
but it shouldn't really get a sense. I mean, it gets you curious because, like, the guy at the end, he's talking about the apostles and stuff, and you see the Behelit, and it's like, this does, like, the new show does do those things in the course of, like, 3 episodes in a much more obnoxious way, whereas this one just gets that information out, and then it goes into the
What's weird is that the new show didn't need that, because the new show presents itself as a sequel to the original anime,
which is weird, because it's like the whole reason they did the 3 movies was to get through the Golden Age arc, and now they can go past the Golden Age arc, which the 90s show is the Golden Age arc. Now this new show is finally going beyond that, but then it presents itself in this weird way, where it's still doing flashbacks to the other stuff, and I'm like, it's just confusing.
It's like they want it so that new viewers can understand, but new viewers should not be watching it, because it's not. It doesn't make any sense to watch this as anything other than a sequel to the original show.
Yeah.
So why, like, try to reestablish stuff that was already done in the original? And I was arguing that there was no reason to adapt chapter 2 of the manga, because chapter 2 of the manga is not that great.
Yeah.
And, like, it could be skipped entirely. And, like, the whole early part of the manga doesn't really fit with the rest of the series, because there's a lot of plot holes where the author clearly changed what he wanted Guts to be as the manga went along. So the only reason to go back and do episode 2 again would be to reestablish the fact that Guts has the brand and that he gets haunted by demons, which was all established in episode 1 of the original show.
It's weird, because it's like, you kind of got to go back to establish Puck.
Right.
Because Puck isn't reestablished. But then they skip over the conclusion of the Golden Age, which is, like...
Which was the most necessary thing. Well, didn't they do that in the 3rd movie?
I think they do a bit in the 3rd movie, but they don't,
I think they show what happened to Casca in the 3rd movie.
They kind of show that.
But they should have started this off with him, like, leaving Casca to go on this journey, and then, like, just kind of have him find Puck in there's a million ways they could have done it without this weird amalgamation of different chapters from all over the manga.
That's that's kind of what
before
it is.
Jumping into a totally farther along arc, you know.
And it's like, I know why they're jumping into that arc, because that's like the next big huge
arc,
awesome arc. But then now we're getting cheated out of those middle arcs, and we'll never get those. Like, now we never get the adaptation of those things.
The best way to have done a new Berserk anime would have just been a scorched earth policy on all the old stuff.
Yeah.
Do a Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. You know, like, get through... Because Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood kind of does to the early chapters what the movies did to the Golden Age, right? They kind of breeze through it really quick because it's already been covered in the other anime, and then they get to the new stuff.
Yeah.
And, like... But we should have had everything else. We should have just had this be... You could have made a Berserk anime as long as you wanted it to be. Yeah. Because people will watch all of your Berserk. Anyone who cares, anyone who gives a single fuck about Berserk is going to watch the whole thing.
Yeah.
You know, back in the 90s, that show... I don't know how successful it was in Japan, but it's been a cult classic for 20 years. Yeah. People have been dying for a second season of Berserk. People have been dying for a continuation. People love the manga. There's enough manga material to easily make 50 or 60 episodes, maybe even up to 100 episodes, you know? Maybe by the time they finish...
for a long-ass time.
If they started from the beginning and just adapted every single chapter, then they would probably take long enough that there would actually be new stuff to adapt by the time it was over, you know?
And, like... I would have rather they not done movies. It just started from the beginning of another series, because the movies even cut stuff out and make it weird.
The original anime cuts out... Because the necessity of readapting it in the first place was that the original anime cut out the Skull Knight entirely, and it cut out, like, little details about the apostles that would become important later, because they weren't important enough in the Golden Age arc. They were stuff that was establishing what would happen after it.
Yeah.
And so... They had to redo the Golden Age arc to bring those elements in, but then they just cut out a bunch of other shit.
Yeah.
So the movies are not watchable as the Golden Age arc.
Yes.
You know,
they're not watchable
they don't communicate
as a replacement for the manga, which
Right.
is what you dream of out of an anime adaptation. Is this should be the better version of the story? They
Right.
should have all the details
Why
in and
bother
be
if it's
be
not
the
gonna be
replaceable- exactly
better?
What the fuck is the point otherwise?
There's some people who said of the new anime, like, as long as, you know, oh, well, at least we're getting something. And it's like, we don't need something. We have the manga. The manga is amazing. The manga's a 10 out of 10. We don't need a shitty anime.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't improve my life at all to have a shittier version of the manga when I have the manga. And I'd never watch this new show over the manga. I'm barely willing to go back to the old show over the manga.
Yeah.
Because even though the old show is really solid, it gets the tone right, it has a great soundtrack, it has, you know, great artwork. I think it's a very solid way to introduce yourself to Berserk. Like, if you wanted to start with the anime and then read the manga, it would be a solid way to go.
See,
but
that's
like,
the thing where, like,
it still doesn't fill in for the manga, you know?
because for adaptations, we've argued before the reverse of this, which is an adaptation can be good as a promotion for the original material, which the 90s anime does that perfectly, of being, you know, not the complete story, but it's cool enough that it doesn't end, so you might be curious enough to go read the manga and get the better version of the story. Whereas if I had no idea what Berserk was and I watched the first episode of this new anime, I would just think it's fucking dumb and I'd never get into it.
Right.
Like, by making a worse adaptation, you're just making people think that the original material is worse than what it is, because it's not.
And
it's great.
I think it's especially difficult with something like Berserk, where it's gotten confusing now.
Yeah.
Where, like, if you make a new show and someone's like, all right, well, now I'm curious about the old show, someone then has to sit you down and guide you through how to Berserk, you know, because there's so many different parts. And the manga's fucking long, so it's really hard to get into. And I understand why, like, a lot of people would probably just be really hesitant to even try with Berserk.
Yeah.
And, you know, if they see this new shitty anime, they're going to be like, whatever, I don't even, you know. I don't know. Maybe I could be wrong about that, but I'm just saying this new anime doesn't need to exist. It's not good. And the original is perfectly fine. And it has iconic images in it. Like the way they introduce the God Hand with the flashing lights and then Femto looking all like dark and grim. And it really feels like Berserk. It feels like a classic show, you know, even if it's not necessarily amazing, it's still a classic show. And I think all of that has been lost in the new version, and the idea that there's anyone who thinks that the new version is better than the original is astounding to me. That anyone even thinks it's good is astounding to me, but better than the original, it's especially astounding. Looking at you, Kotaku. What the fuck?
Way to fucking go, Kotaku. Round of applause for Kotaku for just nailing it every time with their fucking articles on
Sword Art
anime.
Online 2 is the smartest anime on television.
Very smart. Very intelligent. My IQ is rising watching Sword Art Online.
It feels like a parody. It's like, even Anime Maru doesn't make me cringe this hard. And that's a fake news site. Oh, man. Well, alright, so I would give the original Berserk anime episode 1. I mean, if I gave it a score, it would be like a strong 6 to a light 7. Yeah. Because it's not very strong in terms of, like, intrigue. Yeah. It's more just about the tone. It sets a great tone. It's well animated in parts where it needs to be. It always looks good. If I saw the first episode of that now, and I didn't know anything about the show, I think I'd be curious enough to keep watching.
I would, if I had seen the 90s Berserk today, just going by the tone of the show, I would have been hooked, and I would have been saying this is going to be one of the best shows of the season, just by the pacing and the way it uses music and sound. It felt like the quality of when I watch an HBO show and I go, this is on a step above like a normal TV show,
right?
Where it feels like I'm getting something that is a work of art that has some thought put into it and some expertise into it, versus this new Berserk show that just feels like whatever the fuck. I don't know. I feel like I want to look into it and see, was this a young guy? Is this his first show or something? Like, who the fuck directed this show?
The studio has only done Take-Q, which is nothing like this.
It's made by amateurs.
With that with the old show, even though it's not immediately exciting, it has this sense of being like well crafted, where every image in the show is so interesting to look at and detailed, and it has this strong sense of pacing and directing, and it really makes you feel like maybe this is going somewhere, even if it's not immediately interesting. Kind of like Technolize, where it's almost hard to watch the first episode, but there's so much ambition that it draws you in. Whereas there's a lot of other shows that start off kind of like this, that are slow but not that pretty looking, and you just kind of feel like there is nothing there.
Yeah.
Whereas with this show, you can tell there's something going on. And I just want to emphasize that we're not shitting on this because of the fact that it's CG animated, because there's a Sega Dreamcast Berserk game.
Look up the Sega Dreamcast Berserk game. It is written by Kentaro Miura. Yeah. Has a Suzumu Hirasawa soundtrack just like the anime. It probably came out shortly after the anime.
Yeah, like 99.
And
Dreamcast.
I think it perfectly captures the tone of Berserk. It does a good job. It's paced well in its cutscenes, and it's a blast. Like, I didn't get to play all of it because our Dreamcast is broken, but it was a solid Berserk adaptation and original story, you know?
And that just proves that you can capture the feeling of Berserk, not only with CG, but with old CG.
With shitty Dreamcast CG.
Because, like, we were making fun of this new show for the fact that the modeling looks like a Dreamcast game. Like, it looks ancient, and the show is already... not to say that it will age, that it is already aged. Yes. It looks ancient, you know. It looks
dated immediately.
It somehow looks older than the actual anime, the 90s anime. But the Dreamcast game looks like Berserk, and even if you can tell that the graphics are dated, it still holds up with the tone and the artistic side and the things that matter, you know, possibly even better than the films.
And to the best it could do for being a fucking Dreamcast game.
Right. So, I think this new anime just kind of dropped the ball in every conceivable way, and you should just go read the manga, because there's no sense in this. There's no sense in even trying with it. It's not worth it.
And this now we don't get our perfect Berserk adaptation. Is it going to be 20 years before it gets adapted again? Who knows? We'll never get the perfect Berserk anime.
Well, hopefully, maybe when the manga actually ends, if it actually ends, I would love to get our FMA Brotherhood, our Hunter x Hunter 2011 version of just every single episode.
Yes.
Do it all. Do the whole fucking thing. Do it well. It doesn't matter how long it is, because people will watch it.
Yeah.
Give us that version.
Or the JoJo version.
Yeah, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure adaptation.
That style would be perfect. It doesn't have to be beautiful.
Yeah,
we were actually the greatest thing ever.
We were discussing that the new JoJo, like, it's not that well animated.
Yeah.
But it totally feels right for like what JoJo is, that it's all about the poses and about making sure the characters always look really detailed and ridiculous, and like having this artful directing and stuff that compensates for the lack of motion. And Berserk could be that.
Yes.
Berserk doesn't have to be well animated. It just has to look great, like the original show, where it was not well animated, but it looks great and has the tone. So, you know, would love to see that one day. But anyways, this has been Digi and Vic discussing Berserk versus Berserk, testing out our new light fixture. This is a style of video that we are hoping to do a lot more of in the future. Probably not soon, but in a couple of months, I'm going to be doing a lot of videos in this style, if you guys like it. So let me know what you think of this style down in the comments, and we'll see you in the next video. All right.